generic type, and its return type is generic type, and it should return that particular argument. That means the class is generic type. This time the class is generic type. Then what happens is, while creating an object for that class, is equal to, that means new, I am allocating memory for that product. And when it is a generic type, while allocating memory, I will tell what type of value this class should handle. In its memory. I define as a string type. Then obviously what happens now? So what happens now is the obj dot print. This print so is expecting some arguments, and you see currently argument is unknown. And now I am passing the argument as a string. And usually if it is a string, then it will accept the string type. So welcome to generics, and it can handle it. Now very important is, suppose I am making it as number. And I am passing a number. That means it is able to handle the number also. Then why we created a class as a generic type? Then what is the intention of classes as a generic type? The intention of class as a generic type is nothing but, inside the class, whatever the members initializations are required, you can configure them as generic. Initializations, whatever the initialization of members are required, you can configure them as generic. So that your methods and the return types can be generic. That means simply what we can do is, that means methods it can individually handle any type. Usually why you created a class as generic type? What is the intention of the creating of class generic type? It can allocate a generic type memory. When it allocates a generic type memory, then what happens here is, for example, now in this location, I am initializing a value here. I'm declaring some value here. Suppose I'm configuring a value, public, some value, and this value is generic type. This value is configured as generic type. And we are configuring everything as a generic type. Everything as a generic type and returning it, right? Now what happens is, the value type which is present inside this particular product, that means suppose product, here I will define as suppose some price. So this price is generic type. Obviously, actually it will be a number type, but just roughly I defined the price. Price is a generic type now. What does that mean here? So if you pass string into it, and you are configuring an object, and here, so we are accessing some value. So I want to access the value of price and use the value of price inside the functions. If I want to access the value of price and use the value of price inside the function, that means here I declared an object, and I want to access the value from that particular object. So because price is a property, I'm accessing price here, and you can see price this time. So what it can handle, I'm using a number, it is unable to handle, because now it will be only a string type. So when I create this object again, so where I defined, so this is object one again, and I defined new product, and I said that this is a number type, then object dot price, this time price is able to handle a numeric value. But here, so here you can see that the problem, it says that the product is a string and the price is a string, and this is not assignable. Why it is not assignable? Because already you defined the type in the memory and you are still using the same memory. So for example, I don't define this string type memory, and here I am configuring a number. So obj1, sorry, I will define both of them, right? This is obj1 dot price. Now you can see that it can handle both type of values. I will remove this. So it can be number type. I added this. It is a string type. If it is using a static memory, then you will have a problem because that memory will continue. Currently we are using dynamic memory, so no problem. So that means now obj, it is handling a string type, then this is handling a number type. That means you can make the properties generic type, and the type of these properties will be decided. The type of the properties will be decided while allocating the memory for that particular class. That means when you are allocating memory for the class, at that time it can be defined with the type, so that all the properties which are designated as generic type will use that particular type of data. So that means what is the intention of initializing a class? What is the intention of initializing a class as generic type? So that while allocating the memory, so it can handle that particular type, Of course, when you are defining the functions, if you are configuring the functions, for example, so we have a print function which has to print the value. Then see, we are using obj dot print. Print is a function. So print is a function. Now I am configuring this print as a function. That means I am redefining the function. So is equal to function. And this time the print function is expecting the arguments. So we can pass the arguments and return those arguments. That means it is expecting argument. It is expecting an argument, and we can define those arguments and return those arguments. Later I will show you how you can implement those functions and use those functions, right? That means redefining the generic type of functions. I will give you in a different example for that. So that means how we can redefine a generic functions, right? Initially, first we need to basically understand what is the intention. I don't need this because already we have done that. Basically, we need to understand how we can configure and handle this generic type in a class. What is the intention of creating a class as a generic type? So that its members can be handled with that particular type. That means it's not necessary that all members should be generic type, because I defined here name, and it can be a string type. That means a class can have both generic and non-generic members. The generic members will be decided with the values according to the memory allocated. That means here I am using obj.name. I am storing some TV. That means it is storing a general value. It is a non-generic type. It's not necessary that all should be generic type. It can be generic or non-generic type. Right? That is how we are configuring the value. That means obj1 dot name, and here we are defining some mobile, something like this. That means a class can have both generic and non-generic type of values. The intention of generic is to keep type safe. Right? That is the main intention of generic. So this is just a syntactic